Hello glam queens and kings, welcome back to my channel. My name is Priscilla Chigariro. If you are new here, welcome. I took a bit of a break for the past week because I felt pretty burnt out. I think since I shared my story and everything just got off my chest, I went into overdrive and completely started overworking myself and almost like a kid in a candy store, because I felt like I hadn't actually lived. I hadn't been working, I hadn't been doing anything for such a long time because I felt like I had this huge weight on me. And now after it was lifted, I felt like the world was suddenly so open again for me, and I had like all these things that I wanted to do, and I just overdid it. So yeah, I had to take a break, but I am back and I will hopefully be able to be more consistent in posting videos. I have lots of plans and I hope you guys like the content that I'm going to be sharing with you guys and the content that I'm going to be creating. I'm really enjoying making videos and continuing to talk, and I have like all of these ideas of stuff that I want to talk about and things that I would like to do on the channel. So yeah, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and help me grow my channel. And if you do like this video, please give me a thumbs up, and any of the other videos that you've watched, that will also help me to grow. But anyway, without further ado, today we are going to begin our Real Talk series. So I have talked a lot about my marriage, and before I started this series, it kind of dawned on me that I had never really talked about my background, where I come from, how I grew up, and all that kind of thing, because I feel like where you come from really does have a very big influence on who you become. And it kind of basically, like they say, your background basically structures the person that you are and influences a lot of the decisions that you make, etc. So for you guys to be able to understand me better, because we are on this path of getting to know each other, yeah, I wanted to start with sharing that. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So go grab yourself a drink or a snack, and I will see you guys in a minute. As I'm sure you guys remember, I am 41 years old. Okay, let me think. Where do I start? My parents got married in 1979, and I have one older sister. With my parents, there are 6 kids in my family altogether, and I am the second born. For the first 7 years of my life, we lived in Harare on Harare Drive. My dad my dad is super hardworking. I think that I got my work ethic from him, and also basically my drive to achieve a lot comes from him as well. He came from a rural background and managed to work his way from Mashingo into Harare, and ultimately he became the first Black manager of Colonial Mutual, which is kind of now Old Mutual. So because of that, he was able to buy a house on Harare Drive, which was something that was absolutely amazing in the 80s. And this was early 80s, 1980 actually is when we moved there. No, 81. Yeah. I was born there. My sister was born at their apartment. So in 1981, my parents moved to Harare Drive. It was a big deal because there were no other Black families that were living there. And he was doing really, really well. He also then went ahead and bought a farm in Karoi, where his family was from. And then we lived there for 8 years. I don't really have like a great memory of those years, but I remember that I went to Vainona Junior School until I was in grade 2. And then from there, we were moved to Kyle College, which was a private boarding school in Masvingo. So most of my school years, my sister and I were, well, the kids in my family, we were in private boarding schools. I think the one thing that I will forever be grateful was the fact that our parents invested in our education. They found it important to give us the very, very best education that they could. And whilst, I know that a lot of people back then had this mentality, like, because they're predominantly girls in my family, there are only 2 boys and then there are 4 girls. So they kept saying to my dad, oh, why are you wasting your money sending girls to private schools, etc. So for him, he never discriminated. Like, he's always treated us all the same, and to this day he looks at us all equally, and that is one thing that I'm extremely grateful for. So we moved to our farm. So my parents sold our house on Harare Drive and the farm that they had in Karoi, and they bought a farm in Mazoe. That was in 1987 or 88. So we moved there, and we continued in boarding school. When I was about 13, well, actually, basically, as we were growing up, I remember my mom had a couple of sewing machines. She was very creative. Like, our house, the reason why I think most of the children in my family work in the creative industry is because of my parents. When I was much older, I actually found out that my dad was a model, which was so funny to actually discover. I found some old pictures of him in one of his briefcases. He did some ads for Edgar's, and he also worked for a guy called Carl who had a shop on First Street. It was so popular. And like, I was so surprised, like, finding out all these things. And like, growing up, we had like recording equipment, like for music, because my parents wanted to be musicians at some point. So when we were kids, we would just like record ourselves singing, etc. Like, just playing. But we had access to all of these creative I'd say like creative equipment. Like, you could record yourself singing, you could sew, you could knit. There was just, and because we were on a farm, there was no limit when it came to space. Besides the sewing, my mom was like amazing at knitting, and she was also a photographer. She had this amazing camera, and we have like hundreds and hundreds of pictures of ourselves when we were small. So I would say our environment was extremely creative, and we were encouraged to actually develop interests in anything and everything, including fashion, because I started actually, like, from my mom is where I learned how to sew using her machines, and I started making some of my own clothes, and she really encouraged that, and that's something that I continue to do all the way up until about upper 6. I was making my own clothes and also being afforded a really good education. You could afford to think out of the box, and you were exposed, and we were exposed to so much that for me, my mind started growing at such an early stage. I remember I used to, during meals, or like, when we were just hanging out in our kitchen, I would tell my family all these stories about the things that I wanted to do when I grew up. I had all these amazing big dreams. And my dad used to say to me all the time, you must always continue to dream like that, always carry on dreaming, because if you don't dream, then you will never achieve anything. You will never want to be better than what you are, or never improve on yourself, which was actually something that stuck with me like forever. So when I was 13, we were still living at the farm, and I have no idea where it came from. But I guess, you know, when you're creative, or when you're good with your hands, I was good with my hands, I suppose. I started braiding. As you all know, I braid my own hair. Braids and cornrows and absolutely anything to do with hair I can just do on my own. So at 13 is when I actually started, and I started braiding. Like, I would braid all my sister's hair, like before we would go to school, and then my parents would have to take me to the salon to get my hair braided, and then they would pay to have my hair braided. So like the first couple of times this happened, I was like, okay. And then like the next time I was like to my mom, like, it's not fair that that person that's going to do my hair gets paid, and I have to braid 3 people and I don't get paid. So I started charging. That was basically my very first business. At 13, I started braiding hair and charging money for that. And I had recurring clients because there were 4 heads in my own household. And then we had friends and so on, and they started bringing their kids. And I never actually got any pocket money or anything like that ever again from my parents. I didn't think it was unfair. For me, it actually was sort of like my first step into independence. And I really liked the fact that I was making my own money and I could spend it how I liked. And, you know, you have that sense of like, oh, okay, I have accomplished something. So that carried on. And then when I was about 16, we moved into the city. My dad decided he wanted to get back into insurance again, and we moved back to Borrowdale, and we became day scholars. We moved schools as well. We went back to Vainona. For me, that was actually sort of the very beginning of my world becoming even more full, because, you know, growing up on a farm, it was, you know, as much as we had television and exposure to some things, we were not that exposed to a lot of like people with real ideas and thoughts, etc. So going to the school, to Vainona, opened my world up to like the possibility of being able to make those dreams, like all those things that I had been thinking of doing, actually come true. I was like 16, 17. A friend of mine entered Supermodel in Zimbabwe. She was going to Vainona, and she was one of the finalists. They went to Victoria Falls, and it was just amazing. It was all over the papers and stuff like that. And that was the first time that I actually thought to myself, wow, maybe I should try this, you know, maybe I should see what modeling is like. Unfortunately, the following year, my mom passed away, which was very devastating for my family. And being 6 kids in the family and like left with my dad, it was a very, very tough transition, because obviously he had never had to manage all of us by himself, and it was just us. So that was pretty tough. There was like a lot of combat in the house, as you would expect, but we made do. I did my lower 6, and then when I was in upper 6, I was 18, I entered Supermodel as well. I was a prefect at Vainona, so one of the other girls who was a friend of mine, who was a prefect as well, used to bring magazines to school, like Elle, like South African Elle magazine and Cosmopolitan, etc. And just looking at those magazines just fueled this desire that I had to be a model and to see this world that I was looking at on these pages. And since my mom had passed, my dad had gotten quite a lot stricter. And it was literally, you go to school, you come back home, and you stay in there. But he used to give me some allowances because I was a prefect and I had responsibilities, and I was part of like the Interact Club, and we would visit orphanages and do like charity work, etc. So he would allow me like a bit of leeway to be able to do these activities. And also I was like hugely into sports. I was the school sports captain. I swam, I did basketball, I did athletics, I did volleyball. Yeah, I was pretty athletic. So I was the school athletics captain. So I did a lot of sports over the weekend, and I just basically kept myself really, really busy. So when Supermodel came around, time to apply, there was a big casting that was held in a hotel in Harare, and I made up a story to my dad. I told him, you know what, I need to take my blazer to the dry cleaners, and the dry cleaners that we used was on First Street. So I went into town, dropped off my blazer, ran to the hotel, did the casting. I didn't actually expect to do well. I was just like, you know what, I'm going to go, I'm going to try, because I don't want to look back and kick myself. Like, why didn't you try? Why didn't you go? Etc. So I went, I was like, you know what, as long as it's done, then I can just, you know, put this on a shelf and be like, I tried and it didn't work. But I got there and I was told to wait, to stay longer. And I was like to myself, oh my gosh, looking at the time, I was like, oh my goodness, I've already been gone for like 2 hours. He's going to be wondering where I am. So I went to the lady who was doing the casting, and I was just like very kind of, you know, I just asked her, I'm so sorry if I'm not going to make it or whatever, please can I go? Because, you know, I have to get back home. And then she said to me, well, you know what, it's fine, you can go, but please make sure that you call in 2 weeks to check if you have been accepted to the next stage. So I was like, okay, great. So grabbed my stuff, went back home, acted like nothing happened, went to school, told my friend that I went, and that was it. And then I waited 2 weeks. I didn't hear anything. I asked the girl that I had initially spoken to, because she had also re-entered again that year, and she told me that they had called her, that she was a finalist. And I was like to myself, oh, okay, so that means that I didn't get it, I didn't make it. So I just left it, and then she was like to me a couple of days later, like, oh, did they call you? And then I was like, no, they didn't call me. I didn't hear anything. And then she was like, you know what, maybe call them, because, you know, maybe they're trying to get hold of you and they can't, etc. So I called them, and sure enough, I had been selected as a semi-finalist, but they had been trying to reach me and they couldn't. So that was like amazing. But then for me, because I wasn't actually prepared to be selected as a semi-finalist, I again had the situation of trying to figure out what I was going to say to my dad, because the semi-finals were going to be done over 2 days, and I would have to go for rehearsals, and it was happening in Avondale at a theater called Seven Arts. I had no clue what I was going to tell him. So I went to the computer room and I typed out like this whole, you know, back in the day when you had a school trip, you would like bring this letter with an indemnity form for your parents to sign saying you're going on a camp or whatever. So I made up this whole trip for Interact, where we were gonna go to, like, I don't even remember where I said we were going, and we were gonna be gone for 2 days. And these semifinals were on Friday night and Saturday night. And I told him we would be back on Monday morning, because I knew I would just spend the weekend at my friend's house, and then I would go to school on Monday morning, and he would see me at school, and he would pick me up from school on Monday afternoon, and it would be like nothing serious happened. So he bought this and he signed my indemnity form, and I went and I stayed at this friend's house for the weekend. It was my very first time actually spending a night at a friend's house, because that was just not something that we did. And my very first time actually being out at night anywhere, and kind of like having to get from one place to the other in Harare by myself. It was scary and it was exhilarating at the same time, because you know, when you are kind of very sheltered, any little bit of excitement, like just going to a mall, is like, oh my God, that's so incredible. Anyway, so for me, this weekend completely changed my life. It was, it made me want more. I wanted more of this freedom. I wanted more of this world. I wanted more of this kind of life. And the weekend went by, and at the end of the weekend, I was selected as one of the finalists. This was like, at every single stage, I kept having like mini heart attacks, because I didn't expect to move on to the next one. So I was not ready, and I had no plan for what I was going to tell my dad. And now this one was worse, because the finalists had to go to Mauritius. I didn't have a passport. I had never been anywhere outside the country, and I had no clue what I was going to say to my dad. And on top of all that, they were going to print the finalists in the newspaper. It would just be all over the press, and there would be no way for me to hide it. So knowing this, I like very quickly on Monday, on the same Monday night, I told him, well, this is what I said to him. I went to him, I was like, Dad, I sent a picture of myself into this competition that I saw in the newspaper, and I have been chosen as a finalist. So they're going to put my picture in the paper, and they want me to go to Mauritius. I have to get a passport. And he totally believed me. I couldn't believe it, but he did. Which makes me feel awful, because I really hope my kids don't do that to me. Anyway, so he totally believed me. He was so excited and so happy. Like, the reason why I actually hadn't been honest with him from the beginning is because my dad has always sort of been very focused on education. He really wanted us to focus on that, to do well at school, and then, you know, to explore other things once you were done with school. And I knew that he would never, ever look at modeling as something that would help me in any way. But then I had different ideas and different thoughts as far as that was concerned. So basically, we had this whole thing now, and the next day when he went to work, sure enough, there I was in the paper. When he got to his office, all his friends were like, oh, Chikariro, look, your daughter's in the paper, etc. And he was like, you know, thank God I told him. Anyway, so he was really proud and so happy. And he was like telling them all how I was going to Mauritius and how I had just been chosen for this whole thing, etc. So that was an exciting time. He got me a passport, and I went to Mauritius. Like, I went on, like, for the first time, getting on a plane, went to Mauritius, had a blast, came back. We were there for like a week. I came back, and then I went to Victoria Falls for the finals of Supermodel. And again, I was one of the winners, which was incredible. I won, I was chosen as Superface. So there were 3 prizes. It was Supermodel, Super Legs, and Superface. So I was Superface. And as one of your gifts, well, one of the prizes that you would get, I got a contract to model in South Africa with G3 Model Agency, which back then was like this huge agency. I think it's still around right now, but it was this huge agency, extremely impressive. And one of the people that did the who was one of the on the judges panel for Supermodel was a man that did scouting for Face of Africa. So I was then sort of like the runner-up to Supermodel to represent Zimbabwe for Face of Africa if she didn't participate. All of this for me was just mind-blowing. Like, imagine going from just this girl with all these dreams and hoping and wishing that there is some kind of a breakthrough or something happens, and then you're just handed all of these things. I got a cell phone, and back then cell phones were like such a big deal. This was in the year 2000. Cell phones was still a really big deal. Not a lot of people had them. And it was really difficult to get a line for the cell phone. So my dad got one and we were like all so proud. It was just the most incredible time. But when I finished, and that was when I was in upper six. So that same year, 2000, I finished high school in December. And my dad had all these plans. And like basically, Supermodel was in August. So I got all my prizes then. And from there until December, I started working, doing freelance jobs in Harare as a model because I was already, I guess, pretty strong-minded. I didn't want an agent, a model agent. I decided I'll book my own jobs and I'll talk to the clients myself. So I was booking these jobs directly and like collecting and gathering all this money, like more money than I had ever made. My little hairdressing business fell to the wayside and I started like full-time modeling, going to school, etc. I still passed my A levels because like for me, I don't like to fail. And I've never liked to fail. And the thing is, you know what, failure is good in that it does teach you something. You can fail better next time. But then when it comes to things like exams, I do not want to fail because I do not want to repeat. So I passed my A levels, and then my dad was like, oh, college, etc. For me, I had other plans. I had this contract. And I thought to myself, you know, there are certain things that you can only do when you are young. And I felt like I had plenty of time to go to college and study further when I was older. But modeling, I could only do for like that period, 18 till like 25. By then, I would be like, you know, already considered an older model. So in January, the following year, I left my dad's house. I didn't tell him. I just packed my things and I left. We hadn't had an argument or anything like that, but then I knew that he wouldn't understand, and I didn't want to have this fight or argument with him. I wanted to just show him that I would actually not be irresponsible because, you know, there's so many fears when you're a parent, when you have like an 18, 19-year-old who's out there in the world by themselves. And at that time, I felt so grown up. I felt like I was able to manage myself. So I left home and I took my ticket, flew to South Africa and took up my contract. I was like, when I arrived in South Africa, like imagine this, like I have barely like really been around Harare, and now I got to this city which was enormous, full of absolutely everything. All those magazines I had been looking at, all that life that I had been just experiencing through television and magazines was now right in front of me. It makes it very, very, very hard to stick to your resolve to focus on what you are doing. but I did. I didn't let myself get distracted by like all the glitz and glamour. And believe me, this world, like there's men with lots of money that are like hitting on you all the time, alcohol, drugs, like absolutely anything and everything that you could think of that would make most people like completely go crazy. And I was 19. But I think because of my background, like having been so sheltered, I was very protective of myself. So I didn't sink into that world. I didn't like dive in and like, head first, like ready to like, start all of this dating, etc. I took my time. I was very, like my resolve was very clear. I was in South Africa and I wanted to build my career. I wanted to work hard. I wanted to use it as a stepping stone to do much greater things, because I knew that I didn't want to be a model forever. It was something that I had already decided from the beginning. And I think for me, I had basically said to myself, like given myself a timeline. I was like, okay, up until I'm like 24 or 25, I will model, and then I will study, and then I will get myself a job, and then I will do this and I'll do this. And I always wanted to be a fashion designer. So for me, that was the ultimate goal. I was like, okay, by the time I'm 28, 29, I want to be a fashion designer. I want to be doing something that is serious. I don't want to be modeling. So I really took it seriously. I worked really hard. And of course, yes, I did party. There were lots of nice parties. I enjoyed myself. I can safely say I enjoyed my 20s very solidly, but I gave myself time. I didn't really do much until I was around 21, 22. And by then I was very accustomed to that life. I had already also been to Paris and I had done some work there. And then when I was around 24, I went to Spain, to Barcelona, did some work there. I did a couple of jobs like in other countries as well that were really fun. I had an amazing career, I would say, as a model. I met a lot of people that I still work with to date, and people that I still consider friends and family. And I grew a lot. And the first 2 years, my dad and I didn't talk at all. Then he reached out to me through my sister, and because he knew that I was coming to Zimbabwe every now and again, and I would come, I would stay with friends, but I would see my brothers and sisters, meet them somewhere, ask after him and stuff like that. And then like after 2 years, when he saw that I was actually doing really well and things were going fine, then he asked me to come and see him. So I went back to Zim, went to his office. We had this long meeting and this discussion. And like for the first time ever, I actually bore my soul to him, and I told him like all these plans that I had and how I planned to achieve them, and how, I had never had any plan to be irresponsible or to misuse my independence, because I was so focused on being something much greater, and I had no desire to shorten that or to hinder that by getting pregnant or messing around or anything like that. So he got it and he understood it, and we started talking again. And like since then, we've had the most incredible relationship. He's always been extremely supportive of everything that I do, like my businesses, my work. He's always my co-director. Actually, in any company that I begin, he's the other director. Because he's the only person that I really can trust 100% to have my best interests at heart. But yeah, my 20s went by, and then when I was around 25, 26, I did study. I studied interior design. By then, the world exposes you to other things, and you discover art, you discover interior design. So my creative world became much more elaborate, and I discovered that I loved interior design, which was basically an extension of fashion for me. So I studied interior design, and I started working for an interior design company. Then I moved to another one which was bigger and better, and I worked with them up until I was 29, which is when I founded Zimbabwe Fashion Week and decided to move back to Zimbabwe. I felt like after 10 years of my life, because I was in South Africa from when I was 19 up until I was 29, I felt like I had done my time, and I felt like I had a lot of experience under my belt, and I had really grown as a person. I felt like it was a good time for me to move back to Zimbabwe, and I was really eager to start this next step and next chapter of my life, because I actually, besides a couple of like the modeling jobs that I did whilst I was in school, I had never actually really worked in Zimbabwe. I didn't really understand the climate or what anything really was like, you know, on the ground. So before I left South Africa, I did some research, because initially my plan was to go and I had created this designer label called Chrome, and I wanted to just go and start manufacturing, selling, etc. So I started looking for stores or places which sold designer clothes, like, you know, these collaborative stores where local designers can put their clothes. I did not find a single one. And then I looked for a fashion week. I did not find anything. And I met with this friend of mine who was in production, and I was like to her, girl, you know, I want to move to Zimbabwe, but I don't see the point of moving if there is really no fashion industry, you know. And then she was like to me, why don't you create one? I'm like, girl, what you mean? She's like, you know, start a fashion week, start from there. And then, you know, you create the fashion industry, or you create this fashion week, which will help to, you know, start building an industry. And then you can do your design, etc., you know, and showcase your stuff on that platform. I thought about it for a while, and then I was like, okay, you know, after some further research, I decided, okay, I wanted to do it. I took a couple of months, like getting my ducks in a row, putting together my project proposals, etc. And then finally in December of 2009, I did a launch for Zimbabwe Fashion Week in Johannesburg at FTV Cafe, which was awesome. Scary and awesome at the same time. Not perfect, but it was a big learning experience for me, because this was an industry that I had never actually worked in. So starting this event production was something that was completely different, but then also very exciting. The following year, I went to Zimbabwe and I did the first fashion week in 2010. It was so hectic and so awful. Looking back now, you know, like there's nothing that is ever so awful. You know, you have to start somewhere, but everything that could go wrong or went wrong. But at the same time, I felt like the success that I did achieve was the publicity that it got, the visibility, and I felt an awakening in the country. I felt an awakening in the industry. There were a lot of people that were interested, a lot of people that came, and like designers like that had kind of just been operating quietly, that that suddenly, you know, came out and really showed that they really wanted a platform like this. So for me, although the event was pretty disastrous, it showed me that there was interest in what I was doing. So 2011, I worked harder, got better sponsors, and got a great venue, and I did that. It was also not perfect, but it was better. So every single year it got better, it got slightly bigger, there was more designer participation and involvement, and I managed to make connections, you know, using my my connections in South Africa. I was able to bring up like photographers, industry leaders in South Africa that came and helped educate. So the Fashion Week basically grew and grew and grew. And yeah, the rest is history, as they say, because by then, let me think, I met my ex in 2011. Yeah. So that year, after that first year, after the second, yes, after the second Fashion Week in November is when I met my ex, and the rest is history, like they say. Well, so that is basically all about me. If you have questions, of course, you can always ask in the, like, you can always comment below. And I hope this helped in getting you guys to, like, getting to know me a little bit better, like where I come from, my influences, and the reasons, some of the reasons why I am who I am, and why I do some of the things that I do. But yeah, this desire for independence, this desire to work is something I think that has always been with me, and there is no me without a lot of really difficult work. I like to give myself a lot of very hard work and a lot of very hard things to do, but that's what makes me feel alive. And that's what I'm doing right now, and I can't wait to share with you guys some of the new projects and some of the new things that I am working on, and this is also one of them. So yes, thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for subscribing. Please don't forget to like and share and comment on this video, and yeah, keep watching. I'll have another new video up this Sunday. So yes, I am definitely going to try to be much more consistent. Videos on Thursdays and Sundays. And there's another new series that I'm starting on Sunday called Community Stories. So I got so much from sharing my story on this platform. I don't know if you guys can tell, but at the very beginning of this channel, I was like kind of very timid, kind of very, like, you know, shaky, etc. And I feel like I have grown so much since then. I feel like I feel so much stronger, I feel so much better, and it's because of you guys. It's because of this amazing community that you've helped me to build. And for me, I believe very strongly that you heal so much better with community, because they are like-minded people. It's the same as like AA. You go, you meet with other people that are going through what you're going through, you guys talk and you share, and it helps you to get better. So I want this platform to be that for anybody that is struggling with their marriage or with relationships or anything like that. I want you guys to share your stories with me, and if you are open to it, I would like to be able to read your story and share it with the rest of our community, so that you feel heard and you feel seen, and we can also just see how together, collectively, after hearing your story, we can help you and support you. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you on Sunday. Have a wonderful rest of your week. This was Real Talk.